Hello, football enthusiasts, and welcome to the Agent's Angle. I'm Jonathan Booker.
And I'm Peter Paleologos.
And we can't wait to embark on another journey of exploration and discovery into the sometimes enigmatic, yet often strange and unconventional world of football agents.
In this episode of the Agent's Angle, we are joined by a unique guest whose social media featuring football agents showcase the player deals and the agents who make them happen in the football world. We'll be also looking at some top transfer window player deals and markets.
As well as what did and didn't happen in the transfer window, we will be looking at how the media have reported on how the changes to agent regulations have impacted on this window.
All that to come on this episode of the Agent's Angle.
Now, some of the sharp-eared amongst those listening to recent episodes may have noted from the dates we referenced, we took a short break in recording. This was not just to allow us to address other tasks and duties and regroup after what was the first 8 episodes of the Agent's Angle, but also to take into account what turned out to be a dramatic and somewhat hectic transfer window, as well as all the big changes that continue with regards to agent regulations and licensing. But on the point of the transfer window, Peter, how did that pan out for you and the others you've spoken to recently?
I felt actually the transfer window went very quickly this period. It just seemed to go straight into August, September. So for me, the A-League, we saw lower budgets this year. A bit of player movement. There's obviously some opportunities we've facilitated overseas as well. But it's interesting that this transfer window was also, I would say, clouded by a lot of agents asking me help with the exam or feedback in relation to when they have to start looking at their compliance and setting up their agent business in the sense of regulations. They're the ones that obviously that pass. It was actually clouded in a way where everyone was asking questions about 1 October 2023. It was interesting also that after making an inquiry about a month or two ago, the United States Soccer Federation, they came back to me about their exam pass rate and said that 49% passed their exam in April out of, it was about 190 applicants. The window was funny because we're transitioning to this new regs in most countries, I would say, but also deals had to happen. Those two things are quite unique. We haven't seen that for a while.
What I noticed, apart from it being a busy window and a record-breaking one in a number of ways, was a number of situations that would have been very challenging for those agents who were involved. And these include cases of players allegedly going on strike and clubs eventually giving in to allow them to transfer.
Wow.
Players agreeing moves, then the club rejecting the offer agreed earlier. Transfer ultimatums to get business done for a certain time, or the offer actually drops. And I actually thought that's quite a positive one. But a lot of people are critical about leaving it till the last minute. But that actual use of transfer ultimatums, and that was a big transfer as well. We, of course, have the cases where paperwork's not signed in time and transfers don't go through and players and clubs are left disappointed, as well as agents. Top players reportedly not actually transferring this window, but changing agents behind the scenes, if only to benefit from that in the next window, maybe. And of course, the biggest thing I think we can all accept from this window is the emergence of what is truly a new football superpower with the Saudi Pro League. I don't think anybody can disagree with that.
No, that's been a game changer this window, and we'll probably discuss that a little bit more down the track. But I think a lot of agents also, this window also had to facilitate loans because there were a lot of transfers, but there was also a lot of loan of players because a lot of the bigger clubs had huge squads and needed to shift players on loan. So agents not only needed to work on transfers or free players, but also see where they can find opportunities via loans and those wages, who can pay what between the two clubs.
And then they've got to consider the loan limitations as well that have been implemented. So that's another consideration, not just for the clubs, but also the agents in those dealings.
Yes, especially if you're a club agent and you're given a remit to get a certain amount of players out, but also look at the club and who they needed, who they can have for loan and what were the regulations. So it's another framework that's very important in the transfer business. I would say most agents, the bigger agents, it was the same sort of high spending. You mentioned the Saudi Pro League. There was a lot of action there, and a lot of agents, not just from Europe, from South America, have come to that league to facilitate deals. A lot of those top 5, top 6 leagues, now with Saudi Pro League in there. We know that the Saudi Pro League still has its window open. But in terms of the biggest transfers, there's an article by Ian Watson who mentioned about the 20 biggest transfers in the world in the 2023 summer transfer window. And 3 of the 4 biggest deals involved English players, Jonathan. And I'll just go briefly through a couple of these deals. Moses Saicedo, who we mentioned in a previous episode, Brighton to Chelsea, 100 million plus 15 million add-ons. Declan Rice, West Ham to Arsenal, £100 million plus 5 million add-ons. That Arsenal got this Rice beating Man City. Jude Bellingham, who many say is the deal of this window. Borussia Dortmund to Real Madrid, 88 million plus 25.6 million add-ons. People say that's
absolutely fantastic player. And the scary thing is he's got a younger brother as well.
And he's only 20, Bellingham. So phenomenal footballer. Harry Kane, Tottenham to Bayern Munich, 86 million plus 14 million add-ons. And we know that Bayern were looking for a number 9 since Lewandowski left. So he finally got his deal. Neymar, and I'll just mention this last, Neymar, Paris Saint-Germain to Al Hilal. We mentioned the Saudi Pro League, 86.3 million. So they were the 5 biggest deals. There were several others, but yeah, there's still a lot of action in the transfer market. And as we mentioned, the Saudis are basically also now a big player. And I'll say briefly that people see the Saudi Pro League, maybe it's a threat to the big 5 in Europe. But if we break it down, there was an interesting analysis done by The Gorge, and it mentions in terms of the transaction involving the 5 big leagues, Saudi Pro League purchased 15 of 100 best players to move this transfer window. Only the English Premier League had more than the Saudi League. However, the Saudi League didn't target that much younger talent. When I say younger talent, under 26 players. They need 2 out of the top 100. So that's an interesting observation. Obviously, they're looking for experience. But after the Premier League, the Saudi clubs are undertaking the biggest transfers.
And as you said, Peter, it's not over yet. Despite some of the main transfer windows being very much done and dusted, the Saudi Pro League remains open. And I think there's a few notable deals to be done there before the 20th of September and that window closes. But with that, there also comes problems. In the last 24, 48 hours, there's rumours of overseas players signing the Saudi Pro League for tens of millions will actually be left out of squad lists because they haven't got enough berths for international players left. And of course, we're hearing the rumour of Salah possibly going to Saudi before the window closes. And that club, if they are successful, Al Ittihad, is it?
I think it's Al Ittihad, yes.
If they are successful in securing Salah's services, that means another international player. So could we find 2 very expensive overseas imports to the Saudi Pro League from this window, finding themselves not only not playing football or being on the bench, but actually being left out of the squad list altogether?
However, our guest that we've got coming up very shortly on the podcast, it's a fascinating angle, actually, Jonathan, that he has pictures of a lot of the deals that are happening with the agents and the players. And for this episode of the podcast, we decided to take a bit of a social media pivot where our guest, Romaric Etong, who's the curator and owner of the popular football agents Instagram and Facebook page, namely Football Agents. His page or social media platform presents pictures of football agents and their players signing new club contracts and undertaking transfer to new clubs. Fascinating platform that's been around for about 7 years. Welcome to the podcast, Romaric. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about your background in football and where you're based.
I'm based in France and in the US. And I started my football journey as a volunteer for Euro 2016. It was in France. And I had a degree in sports management. So I was looking for an experience in football. Everybody wants to work in football. And after that, I looked for internship after my degree, and I got one in Cameroon Football Federation. You have to notice that I'm from Cameroon, so it was a pleasure for me, a dream comes true. And at the same time, I decided to create a media to talk about Cameroonian football. And when I was at the federation, I was working at the marketing and communication department. And a guy from that department told me, oh, you should ask for press cards so that you can cover football competitions. So I started to cover football competitions, including 6 FIFA World Cup, different categories of age, Africa Cup of Nations, and so on. And I started to get more contacts to get good information for my media. And that's why I got in the football world. I've also been a member of the local organizing committee of African Cup of Nations in 2019. That African Cup of Nations was in Cameroon. And I'm in football since.
Very fascinating journey. Now, I want to talk about your social media, your page. It's on Instagram, it's a website, it's also on Facebook and other platforms. What was the motivation for you to set up Football Agents as a page, as a project on social media networks? And when we talk about Football Agent, we're talking about a social media page that features pictures of football agents and the deals with their players. What was the motivation?
First of all, I have to give you the context. When I was working for my own media, I heard about the case of Fabrice Olinga. He's a Cameroonian player, and he has a lot of difficulties with his agents at that time. And I started to investigate. It was in 2017. And I learned that he worked with Zahavi, who is one of the best football agents ever. I started to investigate on that case, and that's when I fell in love with football agents. I wanted to know what happened behind the scene. In my opinion, players are not the big stars. The big stars are the people who make the deals. And I wanted to be focused on that people. And, it's a project I had 5 years ago, but I was not regular on my platform. But a month ago, I said, I'm ready now. I'm going to speak about all that stuff on a daily basis. And that's what I'm doing. And a lot of football agents contact me so that I can share their deals, even if I'm not well known, but they told me, yeah, it's a good project. So let's do it.
What would you say is the objective right now of the Football Agents, your project, your pages on Instagram and Facebook, now that this has grown with quite a big following?
I only want to try to be focused on football agents, and in certain cases to value them, to value their work. I noticed that we only speak about players, but never football agents. So my objective now is to do a certain promotion of football agents so that we can speak more about them, what is good about them, and also what is bad. And also make people aware that there is a regulations, on football agents. So you have to respect it. So yes, for me, it's a good way to focus on football agents.
From your experience, from your angle of the football agent world, coming from the social media and also the investigative approach, what one word would you use to describe the agents industry as a whole and why?
It's a mess. It's a mess. And that's what is fascinating for me, because sometimes you hear about you heard about a player who used to work with certain agents, but for a specific deal, he can remove his agent and choose another one. It's like the jungle. You can do all the work from the beginning to the big signing, and a big agent, a big fish, take your players and take the commission for the deal. And it's going to be very, very difficult to find a way to make it in the correct way, because there are football agents that they have all the contacts. They make all the big deals. Jorge Mendes, Pini Zahavi. It's not Mino Raiola anymore. the big fish always have the last words. It's not like a common industry where you do your stuff and you get a reward for it at the end of the day. No, football agent is not like that. You can raise a player from the beginning, and at the end of the day, you have absolutely nothing. So for me, that's what is fascinating in this industry.
Now, without giving too much away and too many of your secrets away, there's obviously a lot of work goes into collating all the information, the interviews, the pictures. How do you source a lot of the content to bring to your audience? Does it generally come to you, or is there a hell of a lot of work going out there and actually sourcing it?
Oh yeah, at the beginning, I took the picture from LinkedIn accounts and Instagram accounts of football agents. But to get those pictures, first you have to know them. And I did basic things. I followed Fabrizio Romano. Everybody knows about Fabrizio Romano. And I started to pay attention on people he follows. And there is a lot of football agents. So that's how it started to get pictures of football agents. And after that, football agents themselves started to send me their pictures when they made a deal.
I'll be quite honest with you, Romaric. One of my pet hates is actually seeing the photo of the player with the agent signing a representation agreement. Not so much the transfer, but the representation agreement, because it's all very well it being private behind the scenes, but from chatting with you, it's obviously you see a lot of value in the talent in the agent, whereas probably from my perspective, I see the player as the talent and the agent more to be in the background and only be seen and or heard publicly when absolutely necessary. And that's just opinions. That's just another side of football. Do you think I'm alone in that, or are there quite a few agents who prefer to stay out of the spotlight at least some of the time?
I think you have agents in every categories. You have people like one figure, the first football agents, and maybe the best ever. He doesn't like to be on the spotlight. He wanted to be on his own, He doesn't like medias. But you have a new generation now. They want to be as famous as the player. There is a lot of agents like that. I'm going to speak about Donato Di Campoli, for example, the former agents of Verratti. Mino Raiola as well was a good one. So yes, you have both of them. But when you are not well known, from my experience, they prefer to be on the spotlight. If football agents contacted me to share their pictures, it's because they want the spotlight. And if you don't like it or if you don't want it, you don't create an Instagram account. That's my opinion. And a lot of football agents don't have Instagram accounts. So for me, you have both. But the new generation, in my opinion, they prefer to be on the spotlight.
You use the slogan all about football agents worldwide, and I've seen that on your Instagram page. And why this slogan? Is there any meaning to it?
I not just handle Instagram accounts and Facebook accounts. I also have a website.
Yes.
And I make biography on my website, biography of football agents. And I also share some news on football agents, daily news, football agents. So when I use the slogan all about football agents, it's because at the end of the day, I want to speak on football agents like we can speak of Real Madrid, on daily basis. This football agent did this. This football agent did that. Yeah, that's why I really want to be the number one content on football agents on daily basis. So that's why I have also a website, because it's difficult to write a long biography on Instagram or Facebook.
That website's in French, and we will post that website for our listeners.
We are in a very connected world. It's really easy to translate.
As a non-French speaker, Romaric, I found it translated very well. even with Google Translate, which is quite simple for people to use. And I looked at the site over the last week and it translated very well. I found it very informative.
Romaric, do you find there is huge interest in what football agents do, including the successfully completing player deals? And I mean, in terms of your audience, in terms of the fans, in terms of the people interested in the clubs, the players, do you think there's huge interest in what football agents do? Is it seen as a sassy business?
Of course, the new generation, when they don't succeed in football, what I mean by be successful in football is to be a professional football player. They think about being a football agent. That's the first thing they have in mind, because they think about George Mendes, Jonathan Barnett, and so on. So, of course, there is a huge interest. It's going to be a way for people to dream to be football agents. The only way to be football agents is not working with Real Madrid or to sign Cristiano Ronaldo as a player. You can also be a football agent in your city, in your country, and that's also what I want to show to people. I received a lot of messages on my Facebook page from fans. I'm going to call them fans. And they were curious. Yeah, that's a very good page, very good new concept, because I'm sure they want to find content on football agents. They want to be football agents. It's not for everyone, but there is something in that football agents industry that fascinates people. And so yes, my answer is definitely yes.
Now, Peter and I, as well as yourself and many other people involved in the football world, we appreciate there's a lot of misinformation out there in the football transfer world and also the agent space. Now, we have to sift through a lot of the stories and the articles that we look at. How do you deal with sifting through the information that you collate and verifying it before you publish it on your network? And also, approximately what percentage of what you see is, shall we say, false information to an extent?
That's a tough question. But for the first one, sometimes, as I said, football agent industry, it's a very secret world. So to get information, the right information is very difficult. Sometimes I made mistake when I post something on my Instagram account. And, peacefully, football agents write me. They give me the right information. Now, false informations in football during the Mercato, it's just common stuff. I've been a journalist for a very long period of time, and I know that football agent contact to value their player, to get more money and to get better condition in their contract. So it's just common stuff. It's the game. And the intelligent guy understands the game he plays. And you have to deal with it. The content is just good for the people who read it and believe it.
As football's matured over the years, the commercial value in image and brand of players and clubs has grown, especially for the players. How do you manage the aspects of copyright? And I'm probably going to guess that it's something that you've had to become increasingly aware of and more careful about in a commercial sense. How do you deal with that?
Easily. Because most of the pictures I use came from football agents, not clubs, or, it's not an image from a player on the pitch. So I don't think I have to worry about that as long as it's shared by a football agent.
I've noticed a lot of the pictures these days in the latest transfer window and the one before that, we see agents, maybe 2 or 3 agents for the one player plus lawyers. Have you seen more pictures with entourages, especially with the bigger deals? Is that a trend that you're seeing? A lot of 2, 3 agents taking the picture who are involved in the deal with the player and the club, and maybe even the football lawyer there or the sports lawyer. Have you seen that trend?
Yeah, because even lawyers want to be well known today, nowadays. Yeah, so around players, you have not only football agents, but you have lawyers. Sometimes you have family members. sometimes family members are agents, like René Ramos. René Ramos is the brother of Sergio Ramos, and it's also his agent. And sometimes you also have friends. It's rare, but sometimes you have friends. But it's common now, mostly for big players, like Neymar. You have family members like his father, Neymar Senior. You have his agents, and you have 3 or 4 lawyers around him: Marcos Mota, Humberto Paiva, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of now lawyers who are lawyers and agents. So there's people operating in the space that have got both roles. Again, without giving too much away, what are your plans and hopes for the Football Agents brand across social media? What can we expect as your audience to see both in the near future and in the longer term?
In my opinion, it's going to grow. It's going to grow, and Football Agent encouraged me to do so because people will fall in love with Football Agent world for a long period of time. I want to grow so that I can share more content and more accurate content, but you have to be followed. And I would like to make a podcast, maybe some interviews of Football Agent as well. But you have the lead. I don't want to.
When talk,
Should we cut him off now, Peter? Should we cut the interview now and cut him off now?
We're not here to talk about ourselves because we're really enjoying what you have to say, Romaric. I mean, you're providing really great insights. I just want to say there's a lot going on in the football world at the moment. It's always evolving. We've got players not just transferring, but there's loans, there's squad sizes, there's the new regulations, the Football Agents regulations we speak a lot about, especially in our last few podcasts, and we will because a lot of those regulations come in on the 1st of October. The FIFA regulations come in on the 1st of October this year, although France is a bit different where you're based. They've got a national system, as does Italy. If you had one wish for the Football Agents industry, Romaric, we even convey a wish from your audience, what would it be? What would be your wish for the Football Agents industry going forward?
I think the FIFA license is a good one. It's a first step. I think if you want to be a football agent, you should get the opportunity to be a football agent. And with that FIFA license, you have that opportunity. Just for you to know that I passed that exams just for fun because I've been reading the contents of new regulations for several years, and I wanted to know if I'm able to get the exams. I think it's a very good thing because a lot of football agents don't know anything about the industry. For them, it's just like they have a player and they want people to call them to sign the player, and they just come and sit on the table to say, okay, I want this, I want that. That's not to be a football. That's not how it works. It's not just about money. It's about the whole project, the whole package. And with the FIFA license, I think people will have the basics to start in the industry. So for me, if I could wish something, it was that FIFA license. The FIFA license, we have been waiting it for 5-6 years, something like that. Yeah, let's see how it evolves in the future.
Thank you for that. A couple of final questions. You mentioned that agents contact you. Is that exclusively from France, or was it other countries as well?
No, all over the world. Armenian guy contacted me, people in Dubai, people in France, in Germany, in the US, so all over the world.
What do you do between the end of the transfer window, which most of the transfer window is finished in Europe? Saudi's obviously open for a few more days, and that's an interesting piece there, until the new winter transfer window opens in January 2024. What do you do in the meantime?
I will be focused on my website. Can do more biography, more interview. I can focus on deals because it's time to understand deals. They make deals during the transfer window, but if you really want to understand the deal, you have to take a few days. And now we don't have any deal anymore, so we can be focused on some specific deal to understand how it works. I don't know if you read about Kees Vos, the founder of Sek Football. The last Instagram post of Kees Vos, he said, when the transfer windows close, it's not the end. You have to finalize deals. You have to make some administrative work you were not able to do during the transfer window. You also have to visit players. And I know that when they are going to visit players, they are going to make some pictures. I will share it on my accounts. You have to look for new players and so on. There is a lot of things you can do. I'm going to have even more content than during the transfer window.
I think you highlight a key point there, Romaric, and something that we've touched on in so many episodes is that a lot of people have the perception that, and including a lot of agents, that once the window's closed, that's it. There's nothing to do. But there's a duty of care to those players and working with those players. A lot of people say, well, when the window's closed, what do you do? Well, you're planning for the next window if you haven't planned already. So I think you highlight a very key point there.
Yeah, but
from the
I have to
world.
notice someone is that I saw a lot of agents going on vacation right after the transfer window. I don't know why they are doing that. Maybe they have a lot of employees or just few players. But when the transfer windows closed, there is a lot of things to do because sometimes you wanted to make some deals, but it didn't happen. You have to understand why it didn't happen. And sometimes your player is not happy in the club he is at the moment. So the transfer window is closed, but you have to prepare the next one for those players who are not happy in the club. And for the players, it's big stuff, big stuff.
Romaric, thank you for coming on the podcast. Fascinating insights, fascinating project that you're undertaking and you're doing, showing the audiences. You mentioned something very early on in this interview about football agents now wanting that exposure. That's what the world is about now, and getting on the pictures, getting that social media. So really, thank you for coming onto our podcast, Jonathan. I don't know if you want to add anything there.
No, thanks, Romaric. It's been insightful, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.
A really interesting perspective there from Romaric, Peter, as he tries to bridge the gap in the information chain that often goes astray when it comes down to the mainstream media. And he by no means has the resources available to him that the mainstream media outlets do, but he certainly does a lot on it. And there's a lot of snippets, insights, and photos that Romaric sources when things go to plan with a transfer. And most, if not all parties, including the agent, are happy with how the transfers panned out. But we've referred to what went through in the transfer window just gone, but not everything goes to plan despite the best efforts of everybody involved. So it's worth noting some of the potential transfers from this window where things didn't exactly go to plan despite the best efforts of the agents.
Yeah, look, this was an interesting window. I think we mentioned this before because it's right on the eve of the new FFAR regulation. So a lot of agents need to adapt to the new realities, and that affected this window. Now, some people say that agents wanted bigger commissions because this is obviously the last chance. There's a lot of players to be moved. You've got smaller squads at clubs. There's an emphasis on younger talent by many clubs these days. There's obviously the Saudi impact and that factor that's affected the market as well. But with the commission also structure changing, the commission fees and the caps, everyone's got to adjust. And I think this window was overshadowed with all that going on. So, yeah, interesting time. And that made deals harder, as you mentioned. It's harder to work deals. And we also mentioned loans. A lot more players, a lot more clubs are looking for loans. They're not looking for outright transfers, Jonathan.
Yeah, well, we've got to part 3. And yes, I'm going to say it. I'm going to use the term FFAR. And it is a shadow that still hangs over us to an extent. And there's still a lot of uncertainty. The new agent regulations have had a considerable impact on this transfer window and will continue to have an impact. And this is something not only the agents have had to plan for in this window and those to come, as we're still unsure of what will exactly happen to the agent regulations in just a few weeks' time now on October the 1st. But clubs and club officials also have to be aware of those changes in regulations. And there was an article published that I think you've picked up on.
Yeah, it's the Pinson Mason's article. We'll put that in the notes. But as you mentioned, players, agents, coaches, all covered by the FFAR regulations. but also clubs. And clubs have to adjust and prepare for this new reality. They have to familiarize themselves. And in the article, it mentions that they need to familiarize themselves in relation to the FFAR, which comes into effect on the 1st of October 2023, because there can be sanctions imposed on clubs in relation to breaches of these agent rules. And the practical implications are they need to deal with, as the article mentions, properly certified agents or agents who hold a license. They need to understand the working knowledge of the regulations, who represents the client, is the player the agent's client. All these things have to be understood by club officials, football directors, and clubs themselves to prevent any breaches, because they can be penalised by FIFA or national associations if they breach the FFAR or the national regulations that mimic the FFAR.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say in recent times, players, agents and clubs have been bombarded with regulatory information when it comes to agents and agent regulations. And of course, misinformation as well. We spoke about in the interview with Romaric about how he sorts out, shall we say, the wheat from the chaff, and how he makes corrections when things haven't been communicated accurately. And that's good to see. And these changes are not just from the football authorities. We've got regulations coming in from tax authorities. We've got national legislation, all of which affects agents and agent dealings and subsequently clubs and players. So the one thing I don't think is helpful is some of the misinformation and the sections of the media who do that. Some sections of the media in this window also took the opportunity to mix somewhat untidily agent regulation news with the transfer window itself. And two articles that maybe not total misinformation, but touch on this, were from a mainstream British newspaper, and I'd like to draw attention to that. And some of the information reported is quite good, while some of it is ill-informed and possibly misleading. Now, the first article is very woolly, in my opinion, and has a lot of incomplete content and or is at times out of context. And that's one entitled Inside the Controversial New Agent Rules Shaping the Final Days of the Transfer Window. And this was published, obviously, just prior to the transfer window closing in England. And the first bit is that it says another component of the transfer circus is in a rush to maximise income. Now, that's misleading in a vast proportion of cases and depends on so many other factors. It then says intermediaries will be banned from representing both clubs and players. And as we both appreciate, that in itself is incorrect in the current and in the proposed FFAR, because there is permitted duality for agents to represent clubs and players under certain circumstances. Then it goes on to say fees will be paid via a FIFA clearinghouse to ensure transparency. That, again, as far as we're aware, is incorrect. Payments of agents' fees via the FIFA clearinghouse, the new FIFA clearinghouse, will not happen for what we believe is 2 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2 years. It looks like 2 years, yes.
Yeah, and no confirmation on domestic agent payments has been confirmed, or whether it will ever happen whatsoever. There's no timeline on that. Another point, a cap on the amount agents can earn from a transaction linked to the cost of a move. Now, that's somewhat misleading as well, because the cost of the transfer relationship, as in the transfer fee, is only for acting for the selling or releasing entity or club in a transfer. So that's somewhat misleading. And then another point is that it says in this article, there have been frustrations at a number of clubs and a number of deals that have broken down as a result of these regulations. Now, it's misleading to, shall we say, infer that that's down to just agents or the changes in regulations, because it's arguable that clubs could be making that decision to potentially save money in the next window should the new FFAR come into force in full. Now, the second article is from the same newspaper. It actually comes from in my opinion, one of the better and more respected football journalists. But also within there, it circulates what I perceive to be misinformation on the topic. And there's also some questionable statements purported to be from FIFA and FIFA officials in there. Now, these statements may well be taken out of context. They may be out of date, or they are, unfortunately, deliberately disingenuous and misleading. And this article is entitled FIFA Crackdown on Unqualified Agents After Record-Breaking Transfer Window for Commissions. And I just want to address some of these quotes from FIFA officials. Now, the first one comes from FIFA's Director of Football Regulatory, Jan Kleiner. And he stated, and I quote, "The FIFA football agent regulations are being challenged before the European Court of Justice. Even the special rules that FIFA wants to implement to protect minors are being attacked. This is difficult to understand, but a reality of lawsuits FIFA is facing." Now, this is a very important topic, the protection of minors. And that used in that context on its own, I find hugely questionable and largely disingenuous. It does annoy me as well. That's, me getting annoyed is nothing new, as people will know. But if this isn't taken out of context, this is an example of a statement being spun on the FFAR to suit a particular narrative, whether it be FIFA, whether it be the paper, whether it be someone else. Because, and I think you might agree with me on this, I have yet to hear a reasoned and professional agent, either an intermediary post-2015 or a legacy agent pre-2015, turn around and object to the supportive steps of protecting minors. I haven't heard it from anybody within TFF, within ProFer, within EFA, nobody I know, nobody I've spoken to. So if they're saying that there is an attack on the FFAR by agents focused on stopping minors being protected, I think it's very disingenuous. Now, the second point from there, Mr. Kleiner also insists that the clubs will face potential transfer bans if they use unlicensed agents, but also stress the importance of the new rules by adding, and again I quote, "I can say categorically that we will enforce the rules, always in a reasonable and proportionate manner, but if needed with strong sanctions, regardless of the importance or prominence of the parties involved." Well, on that point, I think there will be many people reading that or listening to this to see how genuine this is and prepared to hold Mr. Kleiner's, shall we say, feet to the fire on this. I know I am. Part of the reason many of us believe agent regulations have failed, both since 2015 and before then, is the lack of effective regulation by FIFA and others, member associations, national associations over those years. And the article actually goes on to say that FIFA are determined to take a firm stance to ensure agents are qualified and also that clubs are heavily punished for using unlicensed intermediaries. By that, I'm guessing they mean agents. This has been lacking in the past massively, these sanctions and proportionate and effective sanctions. There's no mention of FIFA taking national and member associations to task for failing to uphold agent regulations, another area that's failed for a long time, and another reason for the long-standing failings. Now, I'll admit here, I have my own axe to grind with Mr. Kleiner and some of his colleagues, given some of the remarks that were made at the CAS hearing between ProFer and FIFA. Which I take on hearing them firsthand may have been ill-informed and incorrect, but for certain reasons they went unchallenged. But that was a confidential arbitration process, so I won't go into detail, well, not at this time anyway. However, there was another quote in this article, in this newspaper from FIFA, and that is from FIFA's head of agents, Luis Villas Perez, who we both know pretty well, and admittedly, Luis has had an incredibly difficult job to do over the past couple of years with the FFAR. And he finds himself in the firing line quite a lot for the criticism. Sometimes it might be justified, but I would say a lot of the time, on a personal level, it's not. And also, from my own personal observations, he's seemingly used as somewhat of a unjustifiable human shield by some within the higher echelons of FIFA anyway. But Luis is quoted as saying, "The global figure is definitely higher because FIFA only collects agents' fees paid by the clubs in international transfers. FIFA has no information on what agents have paid, for example, in a domestic transfer between two English clubs. It is possible that the recent fees are even more increased because for some agents, this may be a last opportunity to charge a very significant commission. And by that, I'm guessing he means in this window. Now, apart from this being a case of, shall I say, stating the bleeding obvious, and something I and no doubt many others have pointed out to Luis for some time back in the so-called consultation over the FFAR, it's also somewhat misleading to say it's the last opportunity to change a very significant commission when that simply isn't true, and it depends on each and every transaction. And whilst I could also refer back to Mr. Kleiner's comments at the CAS hearing in regards to this specific element, but I would ask, why haven't FIFA got this information? National associations actually collect this data. Well, many of them do. And some have done so for many years. And FIFA can and should request this data and collate it. Under the regulations on working with intermediaries from 2015, FIFA stated that national associations should report such data annually. So why haven't FIFA collected it and analysed it for more than over 7 years? Or dare I say, the fact is the data cannot be spun into statistics to suit a required narrative. As we know, FIFA love a report when it suits them. Now, you're probably more balanced and diplomatic in your take on this, Peter, but I don't know what you take from these articles as well as the quotes. I'm sure you're going to be far more conciliatory in your approach.
Jonathan, I've had a read as well of these articles, and I will just say that firstly, in terms of the commissions, and that agents this window obviously wanted more money because the FFA is coming in and it's got caps on commissions. I don't really agree with that, because when you have agreements in place with players, or if you're representing clubs, the commission's already stated. You can't really adjust too much, and depending on obviously the amount of transfer, the amount of the contract, then the commission might be higher or lower, but you really can't make those adjustments that easily because it's in the paperwork. The second thing is that we're all agents I've spoken to and all the associations, as I'm involved in the Australian Football Agent Association, I deal with a lot of other agent associations around the world. Everyone's in favour of regulation of minors. No agent I've heard does not want regulation of minors. All agents I've dealt with, and it's 2, 3, 4, 500, they all want the regulation of minors and protection of young persons. And that's very important. And that's one of the fantastic elements for me. The other issue is enforcement. You mentioned a couple of quotes, and I know Luis from FIFA, the head of the FIFA agents, very well. And I will say this, and I've said it to them straight, enforcement is the key to any new regulatory framework.
Absolutely.
Now, and it mentions about there may be more fees, and the national associations haven't provided information. We don't know how much the fees are. But I just saw today that the new transfer report by FIFA has just been released, and that's got how much fees we paid in men's football and women's football, because women's football is growing. So we might need to look at that and see where FIFA's landed in terms of international agent fees and national agent fees, whatever is in those international transfer report. But seeing these articles, I think their aim is to say, right before the new regulatory regime comes in, that agents are trying to do this and that. And I don't see that. I think it's, for a lot of agents, a difficult market, hard to place players. You can't just change your commission structures when you've signed a contract with a player or with a club or in relation to a transfer. It's not that easy, because we rely on representative contracts, club contracts, mandates. These are all in writing. So it's not a situation where all of a sudden we've inflated our commissions, etc. Sure, there might be outlier deals that happen that way, but generally these things are governed by the contract and the negotiation and obviously the transfer. So that's my view on these articles. But football is a game of opinion, and in terms of FIFA, we're going to invite people from FIFA to come on the program. We want to get their insight. It's not about just our opinions. It's not about our insights. It's about bringing everyone together and giving their view on the agent's business. So hopefully soon we'll have someone from FIFA to discuss the FFAR and also other matters pertaining to agents. What do you think, Jonathan? I mean, that's the approach we are. Everyone's got opinions, but we need to ensure that we bring all stakeholders or give them an opportunity to appear on our show. And that's what we're about.
Absolutely. It's whether it be from the agents community, there's fractures in the agents community between TFF, PROFA, EFA, the AFA. They all have their varying opinions, and they're all valuable opinions. And until we actually have those opinions voiced, well, we can only second guess. We can only rely on other resources. We don't know how reliable the resources are, but it's not about taking sides. These are key issues that need to be addressed. And I would say most of the people have similar goals.
Exactly. It's all about having those issues addressed and bringing all the different perspectives together, whether it's from FIFA, national associations, agent associations, clubs, players, and of course the agents. So yeah, let's see. And these just also show, and we go back to Romaric, that in his interview, that it fascinates people what's happening in the agent space. It fascinates them. And these type of articles are going to be obviously put out there. These kind of themes are going to be put out there, but just shows the fascination about what agents are doing. And now I want to turn to another article, and I don't want to overdo it, but I think this should be the final one for this podcast. And this is in England, I should say, by The Athletic, Jordan Campbell, in August. Just a recent article that the Association of Football Agents, which is the representative body for English agents, demand more time from the Football Association to respond to new FIFA regulations. The article mentions that there's been a consultation process, a very quick one, which was seen inadequate and unfair by the Agents Association, where they were provided materials about what the FA is going to do with their regulations in England. And several agents were asked to respond, and I think that was broadened as well. And pretty much there wasn't much time to respond. So the agents wanted more time and also wanted their submissions to be taken on board. I don't know what you think of that. You're in England, so you might have had a bit more of an informed view of what was happening between the agents and the FA.
Yeah, we started hearing rumblings about a proposal document for national football agent regulations from the English FA in early August. From the documents we've seen, the feedback was requested no later than the 25th of August. So that's a very short window of time to consider such an important document and something that's so contentious related to FFAR. And in the last couple of days, and it's only hearsay that the consultation has now been completed. But on the matter that I might get 2 soapboxes today on this, having already managed with FIFA and now it's my old friends at the FA. First of all, I'm not surprised by the approach of the FA with such a short window, but we have to ask that they probably had as much time to consider the FFAR as the likes of the AFA, the Association of Football Agents, which is primarily in England and Great Britain, TFF, PROFA, EFA, to plan for these changes proposed by FIFA. And as a legal professional, Peter, I don't know what you think. Is there 8 months of legal work in these documents, considering the FFAR were released by FIFA back in January, some 8-9 months ago? And all this is reminiscent of 2014, 2015, when consultation was rushed and then very little was seemingly taken account in any information. And I was there. I was involved in many of those meetings with the AFA at that time when there were objections to the RWWI. And whilst I appreciate that my former associates at the AFA aren't the most patient, they are perfectly justified to ask for this extra time. So what's actually prompted this? Is it the fact that the likes of Stellar Base and WMG have filed a Rule K arbitration proceeding, or is it the FA making sure they're not accused in a similar vein to FIFA that they haven't undertaken satisfactory consultation? The fact is, we don't know. We don't know who these consultees are. The original consultees, we understand, have been expanded due to quite a few people complaining and being disgruntled. I knew I wouldn't be consulted, so I'm not bothered in the slightest. But it's just strange that something so important is again released so late for consultation. We're looking at the 1st of October. And we're having a document released so close to that and such a short window for people to consider it.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting topic. I think we bring in a guest to really elaborate what's happening in this consultation, what's going to happen with the English FA and their National Football Agents regulations. You mentioned TFF, that's the Football Forum. You mentioned EFA, European Football Agents Association. You mentioned PROFA, Professional Football Agents Association. I just want to make that clear to our listeners because we're using a few acronyms, and you said RWWR, regulations we're working with intermediaries, which is the current regulations till they cease with these new ones. I think we take that offline and we bring it on in the new episode.
Absolutely, because there's quite a few things to pick out from there. But we've still got this Rule K arbitration hanging over the FA and as to how much of FFAR they can implement. And there's a judgment scheduled on that and expedited before the end of September. So that's going to change in the next couple of weeks or so. And as you said, there's still the challenges to the FFAR internationally and not least the ECJ, the European Court of Justice. Every country's got to strike this balance. Every country, because there's a fine balance between an attractive league or leagues and developing homegrown talent and making sure the agents and the agent space fit into that. And it's all going to change. Every country's different, and it's going to be very, very interesting and complicated over the next, I would say, the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting times. You mentioned the agent space, and I think our guest today really provided insightful observations on how agents are looked at, how people aspire to be agents, what an exciting industry can be. We know there's a lot of other issues, but really provided a great flavour to what the agent space excites. And yeah, he was a very good guest. And on that note, it's going to be bye from me. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye from me, folks. Until next time, take care.
The purpose of the Agents Angle podcast is to provide news, information and facilitate discussion on regulatory matters, policies, business trends and issues affecting football agents worldwide. The opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only and should never be considered legal or professional advice. Furthermore, the views expressed by guests are their own and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you for listening.